I go now. Oh,
We're
good
good.
morning, everybody. My name is Robert George, and I'm the Director of Employer Information Systems here at the MTRS. I apologize for starting a little late. Um, Totally my fault. So, first, before we get started, on behalf of the board and our executive director, thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to cover the basics of retiree insurance administration, and we're going to go through all the different options we have available. So, today's program, we're going to touch on some stuff that we have available online. We're going to touch on the basic rules and regulations of retiree insurance, and then we'll take any questions you have. Right now, I have Mildred Rodriguez sitting with me here in my office. She's going to come over and say hi for a quick second. Everybody. And um, and then, of course, making sure that we all stay on the internet. Our Director of Communications, Scott Olson. Thank you very much, Scott, for helping us facilitate this. And, without any further ado, let's get moving. So, one last thing. We will try to make a copy of this presentation so you can take notes during the presentation, available to you in the chat in just a few minutes. I've been having a hard time getting it up online, which is part of what held us up, so I apologize for that. Hopefully we will have that up and ready to go in just a few minutes in the chat for you. For some reason, my computer won't let me load it. So hopefully we'll get that available, and I've just emailed it over to Scott. So hopefully we can get it up and loaded in the chat for you and make that available. Okay. So for today's presentation, we're going to talk about, retiree insurance and MTRS. And, we have an online learning library. We have the Chapter 32 authorizing deductions. We're going to go through employers, the fact that employers offer the insurance, the employer role, all the way down through GASB reporting. So we have kind of a robust list of stuff to cover. This is going to be on the basics of administration today. We're going to touch very little on the group plan rate changes. We are going to mention that program as well, but for the most part, we're going to talk about, with the hope that anyone who's processing retiree insurance will have an idea of how all the rules work, how the process works, and really where it all comes from. Okay, so we're going to start today's presentation with just a mention of our website. So if you were to go online, mass.gov/MTRS, and click on employers, this is what you're going to see. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that we have two of these retiree insurance seminars. So one is very similar to the one we're doing today. We'll probably replace that one with today's session. And then we have the retirement session on changing global rates. So basically the plan prices, if you will, for your different plans or MyTRS. Now, we do have that recorded from when we last held it, and we like that recording the way it is. And I just want to mention that at any time, if you have new staff starting, not only can will they be able to access this training in place of the one that's here online, but they'll also be able to access the plan rate changes, which I know for a lot of folks are basically, this is the season, start putting them in for July 1st. So important information, and our access to MyTRS has been restored. I know we have the blackout period. We'll talk about that a little bit, but it is available for you today. All right. Now, with the plan rate changes, I am going to show you one slide from that other presentation. And this is my sort of mascot, if you will. And, essentially, if I can get you to do one thing or think about one thing with your plan rate changes, that is that when you're in the process, you should never feel compelled to put a stop date into the system, because MyTRS enters all the stop dates for you. And so if you find yourself thinking, oh, I need to put a stop date in, then you're doing it wrong. So I can't say enough, and I know Millie firmly stands behind this as well. This is a process that is, it's relatively simple, but it's something you don't do very often, and it has grave consequences if you do it in the wrong order. So it's set up to be very robust. You go in, you add a new row for your plan, you add a new price. The system will take care of updating all the individual retirees for you as long as you do it in the right procedure. So I can't say enough. Please be mindful of the procedure, okay? And when you're going through it, stop with the stop dates. There's no need for a stop date on a plan you're adding, and there's no need to put stop dates in your old plan. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, oh, I've got to stop my old plan, that means you did it wrong. And please be very mindful that you need to do it in the right procedure, okay? Don't try to watch the video after you've already entered it and broken it and everything, because some things are not fixable. So, well, they're fixable, but they'll be manual each retiree, and nobody wants you to go through that, okay? It's something you only do twice a year, so I can't say enough. Just take the time, watch the video, remind yourself how to do it. We have 2 different versions of the videos you can watch. We're going to talk about that a little bit today too. But I can't say enough. It's, we truly, it's heartbreaking when you talk to somebody and you say, there was a district last year, they have like 350 retirees. They had to add coverage to each one of their retirees because they didn't watch the videos on how to do it. So, and as you know, if you're entering in 350 people in a row, you're going to make some mistakes on stuff too. So on top of the original complication, they had some others that were just entered wrong, fatigue, that kind of thing, human error. So, please I know it seems like it's a time investment, but you only do it twice a year. It's much better to invest the time and do it that way, and then not run into some of the issues. And keep in mind, when you're making changes to a retiree, you're changing their benefit in real time. You're affecting the money that they live off of, okay? So it's super important to treat it with that importance, all right? So with that, so we're going to start a little bit at the beginning for retiree insurance, and that is Chapter 32. So Chapter 32, Mass General Law, Chapter 32, permits the MTRS, and it gives us some limited capability here to help you facilitate the insurance process for your retirees. And what it enables the MTRS to do is we're legally allowed through the statute to take deductions from pension pay and forward it to employers for the purpose of insurance. All right. So there's a couple key things here that are, they come up kind of rarely, but just in case. So we can only take insurance deductions for insurance coverage. If the retiree owes you money for something else, you can't use this as like a claims process. And the other one is it can't be for periods while they're active. So if you're going through settling with a retiree and then you realize, oh my God, we didn't charge them the right amount while they were an active employee before they retired, we're not allowed to help you rectify that with the retiree. You're gonna have to, ask them for that separately. Okay. And we have a whole section to kind of discuss sort of the transition from active to retiree as well. So, we'll cover that too. All right. So keep in mind, retiree insurance is administered by employers. So even though teachers are, when employers opted into offer insurance to their retirees, they're revocable in accordance with Chapter 32B, which is the second bullet here. But it's really employers that are offering the insurance, okay? And so we're just doing our best to try to give you an opportunity to reclaim those funds, do it automatically, and be able to get the money systemically. So hopefully it will, allow you to collect the money with as little pain as possible. Now, some employers utilize what's known as the RMT program. So there's kind of 2 versions of the RMT program, which is the retired municipal teachers that the GIC offers. So some employers partake in their plans, but they administer it themselves, and some pay the GIC to administer the plan. So if you're paying the GIC to administer your plan, there's a number of districts who do that, then you don't have to do any of this, right? You're dealing directly with the GIC. They send us a list of people to take money from. That's all we know. We have no idea where the money comes from, what the amounts are. That gets settled between the district and the GIC that they're paying to facilitate the process. For those of you who are in the GIC program, but you're administering yourself, you're going to do it like everybody else does. You put your plans in, you have the deductions come out. Hopefully you're checking those deductions against your bill every month and all that sort of stuff. Now, the procedures and the rest of this program will apply to people who are not in the RMT Direct. Okay, so if you're in the RMT Direct, really the rest of this program isn't really going to be for you. But for everybody else who does administer their own benefits, that's what we're talking about today. Okay, we try to say that up front just in case anybody is in here by accident. So now we're going to talk about the employer's role a little bit. So you offer and administer insurance for retirees and your eligible dependents and survivors. You determine who the retiree is and their eligibility. Same for their dependents and survivors. You enroll the recipients in their plans, with their actual carrier, the insurance and all that stuff. None of that's done by the MTRS. You enroll the benefit recipients to have deductions. That does happen in MyTRS. So you've set up, Mary, she was a teacher for a long time. Her and her husband are going to get covered under your plan. Maybe you have to set them up on a family plan that's available on MyTRS. So we facilitate plan names and stuff. And then you go in and pick, and again, you're setting your prices in the system. So we give employers full access to do all of that. We're going to talk a little bit about how all that works later, but just as we're talking high level now, we're going to work our way down. You make changes to the retiree options as needed. If you have new plans that you need, that MPRS has to do that part for you. So you're going to offer Blue Cross Blue Shield for the first time ever, right? So then you have to reach out to the insurance updates email box and just say, hey, we're going to offer a brand new plan. This is what we got. Usually I'd say it'd be best to say, hey, we're going to offer brand new plans. Can we set up a call and just kind of work it out with Millie just to make sure we have all the right stuff. Sometimes folks with the best of intentions start sending us all this paperwork we don't understand, or that kind of stuff. And really, we want to make sure we're setting those plans up to put you in the best position to succeed. If you know you're going to a new plan, I would recommend reaching out to us as soon as possible, just in case we don't have the plan. And in some cases, we might not give you the exact labeling of your plan, because we have a lot of plans in the system, and insurance companies just keep reinventing themselves as commercial entities. And so they throw on like a little twist to the name, that kind of thing. The actual name doesn't appear to the retiree. And for the sake of sanity, we're trying to limit the number of plans in the system. We have like 600 Blue Cross plans. The numbers are sometimes enormous. So if we have a plan that very much looks the same, we're going to try to keep you to an already generic name. If it's not even close, then we'll look to add a brand new plan. If we need to do that, the system administrator needs to do that, so that can take a little longer. So try to give us as much time as we can, and we'll try to work it out with you. Okay. A lot of your generic plans are going to be in there, though. Medex is in there. We have plenty of Blue Cross plans, Harvard Pilgrim, plenty of the other different insurance carriers, WellPoint, and that sort of thing. So you also can download your monthly deduction report to reconcile your payments against your carrier bills. So we make those available. We have 2 different formats for those. We're going to talk about those a little bit too. So when you're working on retiree insurance, we're going to talk about some of the different things we have available, but I can't say enough. In addition to this program, if you're going to make changes in retiree insurance, think of this as your sort of work obligation, that you should be looking for the manual that we have available both online, and we can mail you a copy if you'd like of it. And under Section 2, we have a section that we like to call what you need to know before you make changes in retiree insurance coverage. So it's going to cover all the things we have here. We have it in writing, but think of that as like it's the rules. So it's all the stuff you need to know ahead of time. And frankly, it answers a lot of questions that folks, especially when you're newer, tend to email us about, like how the fact that insurance deductions are taken a month early, what you do in a situation where someone passes away, all that kind of stuff, like what the rules are overall are all captured in that one section. The rest of the manual is procedural, but that second chapter 2, we'll walk you through all the different guidelines and rules. So please make sure you put eyeballs on that if you're making changes. You can download it right from the same training site we're talking about with where this video will be stored. And again, I'll point you to that website in a little bit, but I can't say enough. It's really important that you know the rules just to make sure we're all on the same page and you have a good idea and understanding going through it. Okay. Now, a couple of sort of processing guidelines, if you will. The IRS requires retiree insurance premiums to be held on an after-tax basis. So I'm just kind of saying this so you have a good understanding how that works. Sometimes folks, maybe they got billed for 1 month and they're like, I lost out on my tax benefit, or that sort of thing. But keep in mind that these deductions are on an after-tax basis because they're no longer coming from wages. All right. So as mentioned previously, access to insurance changes. It's only for folks who aren't in the GIC Direct program. I think that's the last time we say that in this presentation. Employers have access to change, add, cancel individual insurance for retirees and survivors. So you have full control to be able to make those changes for all of your retirees. But only the MTRS can add new plans. So again, if you have a new carrier or maybe just same carrier and you need a brand new plan, or occasionally for whatever reason, you don't have one of the options you need. Maybe you've had a plan for a while and for some reason you don't have the family plan just because you never needed it. Sometimes those kinds of options need to be added by us. So if there are questions with that, let us know. Sometimes they are available for you in the rate area. You just don't know they're there. Oh, and also optional life rates. Thank you, Mildred. Optional life rates technically are each an individual plan. So if you're one of the districts that offers optional life, and we have a plan in there for $54.22, and now you're going to need one for $61.45 because every retiree gets their own price. Technically, each one of those is an individual plan. So we'll need to go in and add that as a plan for you. Okay. Try to give us a little time with that. just because each time we do that, we have to ask for it from the system administrator. So it can be a bit tedious. All right. And one other thing that's important is keep in mind when you're maintaining rates, they're going to be global. And so because they're global, you can't just overwrite one that you already had. Because if you're thinking like, oh, I'm going to overwrite it for Jane, well, if John also has this plan, you're overwriting John's price, right? So keep in mind, it's best to set those to match the exact label rather than overwriting a plan and just using it, thinking that it's only going to apply to one retiree. All right. Okay. Now, continuing with some of the guidelines that we do have in section 2, again, if you need to request a new plan, you're going to send that to insurance updates at trb.state.ma.us. Employers can terminate a plan by adding a stop date. So this is where I was talking about with the rate changes, right? So let's say you have a plan, you're never going to use it again. You've left Tufts and you're now going to go to some other, you've gone to some other one, WellPoint, Blue Cross, or vice versa, however it's working, right? So you, whenever you're putting a stop date on a plan, it's very important to know that you're going to sever the coverage for anyone who's on that plan. And MyTRS is going to distribute that stop date to all the retirees on the plan. So if you go into a plan and you're like, yeah, we're going to stop using this option, so you enter a stop date on the global price plan screen. You certainly have the option to do that, and you have the access to do that. But you're turning it off for all your retirees. I can't say enough. If you're switching from one plan to the other, I think it's always a good idea to set up your new plans, make sure that they're there, move all your retirees to the new plans, and wait a month or two and just check your monthly bill and just make sure there were no stragglers. You didn't miss somebody. Because if you turn off the plan too early, you don't get that opportunity. So if you're switching from plan A to plan B, and you're moving over, I don't know, 100 people, 150 people, let's say you miss one, right? We're all human. It happens. Someone called you. You're not, you don't get to do this work in a vacuum. I'm sure you're getting interrupted all day long, like all of us. And so if you leave the plan on the next month when everybody's at the new price except poor Phil, Phil still has the old price, then you know that you accidentally missed Phil and that you just need to go move him to the new plan. Okay. And once you cycle through and nobody's on that new plan, no problem. You can add a stop date and it won't clutter up your options menu with, the plans you don't need anymore. Okay. Never delete them, because then you'll tell MyTRS that you're, never should have had deductions under that plan price. So that will cause havoc and a lot of huge refunds that are ineligible. So, be careful while you're working through it. And we have videos specifically on the plans themselves. Please consult those because they're more detailed on this particular subject area. All right. So each month while we're processing, we have a cutoff date. And we try to have that cutoff date up there for you on or by the 1st. Okay. And so that's going to tell you two things. One, it's going to tell you when you have to have your changes in for that benefit period, right? And don't worry, if you miss somebody, you can always put them on the next period and make it retroactive. We're going to talk about those transactions. But if you can, obviously you want to get it on this period, right? You want your money sooner, not later. And so each month we have a cutoff date. We try to give you that date again by the 1st. It's typically in the 3rd week of the month. So, because we have to prepare, run our retiree payroll and we have to give the information to the state treasury. In months that have a holiday, like, Thanksgiving, it's probably going to be a little earlier, right? Because everything shuts down for a few days during Thanksgiving. Same thing around Christmas. So just prepare for that. But again, we give you the date on MyTRS on the homepage each month. Now, entries made after that date will simply just go on to the next month. So if you're in there in the last week of the month and you make changes, don't expect them to be in the check that shows up in a couple of days. And a lot of you run payroll for employees, you know exactly how this works. There's a cycle and then it gets paid out, and then anything not done is done in the next cycle, right? Same concept, except for us, it's a month. Okay. And then deductions are taken 1 month in advance. Whenever you're entering coverage in MyTRS, always just think about when the coverage period is effective, because people start thinking about when the deductions are taken, then they start putting in the coverage periods wrong, and it just gets messy. So really, let MyTRS worry about when the deduction's taken, and you just put in the coverage dates based on when the coverage is effective. So if a coverage is effective October 1st, and you're expecting that first deduction to happen in September, you're only entering in October dates, okay? And if you enter it in too late for it to be done on time, it's going to be okay. In October, it's going to take 2 deductions. So, and we're going to talk about that process, like I mentioned, but just always keep focus on the fact of you're entering in effective dates for the coverage. And MyTRS will help you do the math. It does it immediately, and it makes it available for you to check. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail, but just to kind of close the loop sort of theoretically for now. So when you're making a change to a account with somebody with more than one section, right? So this will be somebody with like first and second medical, that sort of thing. You want to make sure that you're paying attention to the category. Every once in a while, we'll have somebody and they'll make a change and they're doing it for the wrong category, and it could kind of get things screwed up a little bit, right? Um, the other part is if you're making global changes, this applies to that too. Make sure you're changing them because those plans are treated as if they were individual plans. So if you update your Medex in Medical 1 and you don't update it in Medical 2, you're going to wonder why people have different prices when they have, first and second deductions, right? So keep that in mind when you're doing any of your, individual changes as well. Okay. Think of them as being in their swim lanes, if you will. And the order does not matter based on the retiree versus their beneficiary. So first medical is not retiree, and then second medical is a spouse or something like that. They're all the retirees deductions. It's just really which one's coming out in category 1, which one comes out in category 2, which one comes out in category 3. To keep the number of plans in the system down for you to maintain, we try to keep all the options in Medical 1, and then we make a limited number of options available in Medical 2. So whenever you have, a more, if you don't have the option of adding Medical 2, you might be able to flip-flop the order and make something available in Medical 1 and then do a more generic deduction in Medical 2 because we put the more popular ones in Medical 2. So keep in mind, the order is irrespective of the relationship to the retiree. They are all the retirees' deductions. But we do this so that you can maintain fewer plans in the system and hopefully long term is less work for you. All right. Now, and then last but not least, MTRS reserves, it's our system and we have a responsibility to our retirees. So we reserve the right to change any deduction. And so, or cancel any deduction, or even not offer it to to an employer if for some reason we don't think the employer is acting in good faith. We have not done that. It's not something we ever want to do. Occasionally we'll have to change something because of a hardship or something, but we always want to work with our employers. Hopefully you guys all know that's our goal. So, but please know, obviously we reserve the right to make any of those changes because sometimes we have to. Now, if you're adding, whether it's individual or even on the plan rates, there's sort of a philosophy that works in both of them, right? So you have a period and, a certain coverage is coming out, you're making a change. But every time there's a coverage that changes, that change is going to require you to add another row, right? And so they both work consistently in that manner. So if you're going to, okay, July 1st is coming up and everyone with a 65 under plan is probably changing prices, right? Because insurance companies never stay still. So with that, you're going to be adding in rows for those plan changes. And that acts almost exactly the same for individual retirees. So somebody turns 65 and they're going to switch from their under 65 insurance to Medex, right? And so to do that, you're not going to get rid of all the old stuff. You're simply going to say this one's expiring, and on the month that they turn 65, we're adding a new row for Medex, and the Medex price should already be under the plan, and then it's easy peasy, okay? Even if you're making it late. So maybe they're turning 65 and they haven't decided till the end of the month. No problem. You can put it in retroactive to the beginning of the month. MyTRS will calculate the bill for you. And again, we're going to cover that transaction a little bit, but just keep in mind that philosophy always remains consistent, okay? Now, coverage changes are always on a full month basis, okay? So there's no partial. If for some reason you and your insurance company are the only group of folks or the only relationship where you do 17 days at one plan and 14 days at another plan or something like that, we can't accommodate that. You're going to have to go to the end of the month and then figure out the billing difference with your retiree. But so all of our changes are on a full month only. I know it can stink sometimes in certain situations. For instance, if a retiree passes away on the 1st, they paid a whole month of insurance. I totally get that, but there has to be some sort of uniform process to doing it, and that's the way it works with insurance. If you put in the coverage date other than the first day of the month, it's not going to let you when you're going into your transactions. It's going to require that you put in the first day of the month, and then it will block you. Okay. And if you're putting in a stop date that's other than the last day of the month, MyTRS is going to allow you. So for instance, if you're going in to put a cancel transaction in, you have to put in the last day of the month you're using. Sometimes it's a little bit of a test and see if you know how many days are in a month. Sometimes I fail that. I forget which ones have 30 and 31. But other than that, it works really well. And again, all changes and dates are entered based on the coverage effective period. Can't say that enough. All right, so here we have a picture of our external website. This is the employer services site, excuse me, the employer site. And so it's mass.gov/MTRS, click on employers, and you're going to see a couple of different icons here. So first, when you get to the site on the left, you're going to see some different subject matter things on the left-hand side that kind of gives you like static language on certain things, like the retiree insurance rules. Then at the top, you're going to see your login to MyTRS, online training and guides, and news and email archive, right? So the news and email archive is kind of an interesting option that we have. So we have all of the different publications and notices we've sent out to employers over the years. So if you're newer and you're like, hey, what has MTRS sent out to employers recently? I had somebody who thought they were missing a bunch of broadcasts because, maybe their email was blocking it or something. Their school's email was blocking us. I can't imagine why they think we're spam, but it happens. And so we make available every broadcast we send to you is available there. And you can see they go back years. So, we have all the different notices that we send you are available there for your view. And that's going to be right here on the right-hand side under the news and email archive. Okay. And then in the middle is this online training and guides, and that's where you can get videos like this one, but you can also get the actual manual. The digital copy is always up there for both. I mean, we're talking about insurance, retiree insurance today. That's at the bottom of the page. Right next to it, if you also do active deduction reporting, there's a deduction reporting manual there too. And we have a whole slew of videos. We have an entire learning library up there for employers. Now, if you were to click in the middle one, this is what the employer self-services sign-in looks like. I do ask that when you're using MyTRS regularly, please save a copy of this in your favorites, because sometimes people will Google us, and you will see that it looks a lot like this, but it will say member right here. And if you try to sign in on the member door with your employer login, it's not going to let you. So trying to save you a little frustration up front, try to save it all, always save it in your favorites, and then you will get right in there. This is a copy of what MyTRS looks like on the home page. We have our aviary public schools, our fake school district up here. And just to give you an idea, and then over here on the right-hand side is where we have the news broadcast. And this is where we would put out the messages about when MyTRS is going to be down and that sort of thing. And so, again, we take it down for 3 business days each month so that we can process the payroll. And it gives us enough of a window if we detect any large mistakes, like a school district not knowing what to do and accidentally turning off all their plans, or occasionally we'll have a district who overwrites last year's price, and so it tries to bill all the retirees in their entire district for the price difference between next year's price and the current year's price. And some of those bills can be thousands of dollars. So it takes a lot of work to try and reverse things like that, which is why we bring the system down for a couple days. Now, actually, and just before, I know I've kind of covered a lot and I really should have paused for a moment. I apologize. Scott, do you know if we have anything in the chat as far as questions?
We only have one question so far, and it was someone asking for the link to the videos, and I just put it in the chat. I also posted a link to the book in the chat and the employers page. Okay,
thank you so much. All right, awesome. And I apologize, folks. I should have paused to ask some of that. So, okay. So now we're going to talk about MyTRS security. So, employers access MyTRS through the MyTRS portal, the one I just showed you, and the security is determined on the school district level. So for active school districts, that control is relinquished to the superintendent. So the superintendent can always make access changes themselves, or they also designate a security officer. Kind of rarely they keep it as themselves, but they usually will give it to another person in the school district, and that person basically just tells us who should or shouldn't have access to MyTRS. We recognize that we have 400 plus employers. You all do things a little differently. And so we wanted to, give that control to the schools so you can control who should or shouldn't be in there. We also ask that you make sure, for instance, if you have an employee leave, maybe somebody's on an extended medical leave, and we should block their access temporarily. Make sure we keep MyTRS safe, right? And that's important to all of us. Now, employers can designate a brand new security administrator anytime they want. So if somebody's leaving, all they have to do is just let us know. We'll send a form. They fill it out. We switch it over. Okay. Employers can have as many users as they deem necessary. So, in a huge school district like, say, Springfield or Worcester, you have a lot more users than, say, a very small school district up in, down the Cape or up in the mountains or something. So, that full control is given to employers for that purpose. Now, we do have a limited number of what we call inactive school districts. And so an inactive school district is a district that basically had regionalized, but they still have some of their own individual retirees. Okay. And so in that case, since they're maintaining their own individual retirees and the town themselves is still responsible, not the regional, then we appoint, or the town treasurer takes place in the superintendent in that case, because technically the superintendent's not overseeing the town, right? And so the town treasurer in that limited number, I think there's 12 or something like that at this point, maybe 17 in the whole Commonwealth. And in that case, we reach out directly to the town treasurer's office, and the town treasurer is the officer. Okay. All right. It's super important that you please make sure that we know that, when there are changes, if you need new access users, please don't ever share credentials. I had to explain this to somebody this week, but basically like an entire office was using one set of credentials. I would say even just for your own thought process, if one of your coworkers is doing bad things, you don't want them under your name. So, and it's a security violation. So if we find out that's happening, we tend to suspend you out till we can have a conversation about it. Again, schools can add as many users as they deem necessary. So there really should be no need for any of that. All right. And then last but not least, it's up to the employer to tell us when somebody's left employment. So please make sure, with all due respect to everybody, and, most people leave in great terms and they're just going on for another opportunity. But please make sure we're aware. Okay. And we're going to show you very briefly. This is the MyTrust Security Administrator designation form. So this is the form we would send to a superintendent when they want to appoint a new security administrator. Okay. Very simple. It's just a form. They complete it. They say, Barbara is the superintendent in this case, or in our example. So Barbara is going to tell us who they want as their security administrator. They're going to sign it. They're going to scan it, email it back to us. Easy peasy. Okay. And as long as employer access is up, we tend to get them all done within like 24 hours. Okay. Okay. So that's kind of like the overall administrative stuff. Now we're going to get into, the actual nuts and bolts a little bit about doing individual changes. Before we do that, I just want to know, I'm going to presume we probably don't have any questions in there yet, right, Scott?
We do. I was just going to interrupt perfect. And ask a question. Yeah. So someone in the chat said, I have some old, no longer used plans still listed in my TRS. I'd like to confirm that I can add a stop date. No retirees are on these plans. Mm-hmm. Can I put in a current date, or is it better to go back to close to the date the plan ended?
Okay. So we're talking about a situation where somebody has plans that they don't need anymore. So they really kind of clutter up the options screen, if nothing else. And that can be kind of frustrating. So what I would say is if you're 100% confident that nobody's been on those plans for a couple months, I'd probably just do 1 or 2 months ago. That way, when you're making new changes, they're out of your way. I wouldn't go back too far, just because if for some reason someone had that plan longer than you think, you're going to refund them. So, I would say, we're in April now, maybe go back to, if you haven't used them in years, maybe go back to January 1st, or technically it'd be December 31st because it's an end date. And that would be fine. If you want help with any of that, you can email us at Insurance Updates and we'll, go through it with you. And then just be super careful that you're turning off plans that aren't being used. Just make sure you're 100% sure that plan's not being used. And the other thing I would look for would be if you think you have more than one plan that's covering the same, like let's say you have 2 options for the same price and you're just like, I have like 3 of these and they all do the exact same thing. I want to get rid of the extras. The way to do that would be to change the price on one of them by like a penny or something, so that you can just make sure nobody's using the code that you don't think people are using. I've had people turn those off before where they're like, well, I have the same plan with individual and senior and I only need one of them. But keep in mind, if some retirees are on individual and some are on senior and you turn that plan off, you're turning off some of them, right? You got to get them all moved to a consistent plan, then turn it off. So that would be my advice there. And if it's more complicated than what I'm thinking, please reach out to us and we'll happily meet with you and help you sort it all out. All right. Hopefully that answered that question. And then, Scott, is there anything else in there?
That's all we got so far.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Cool. All right. So now we're going to talk about the 4 enrollment types. So we have 4 different distinctions when you're going. I'm sure everybody knows the 4 tiles I'm talking about if you've gone through the wizard before, right? So we're talking about initial, change, correct, and cancel. So initial enrollments, that's when somebody's never had coverage before. That they don't have to be a brand new retiree. It could be somebody who maybe they were under a spouse's plan for a while, right? Or they had some other health insurance coverage. Now they're a third year retiree, they're a 17th year retiree, and now they're putting in their, they need coverage for the first time. So a couple things. One, they do need to have an initial enrollment before you can do any of the other changes. So if it's the first time they're getting coverage, you're going to have to do an initial enrollment. Okay. The only real difference between initial and change is that it does some stuff in the back end. The steps are going to be exactly the same, and if you go through the videos that we have available, we literally demonstrate this for you in smaller videos that are just based on those. Okay. Now, once somebody has coverage, and if you're working on somebody who's been like retired for a long time and it's the first time, maybe they were under a spouse's plan this whole time, and now for the first time they're gonna have to roll in their coverage through their name. We may need to enable them. So if you go to add them and you're like, look, I know she's been my retiree for 15 years. I can't add insurance to her for some reason. Simply send us an email to insurance updates and we'll double check. Right now, every time we get a retirement application, we process it. We enable that retiree just in case they need health insurance, right? So one, we're human. People sometimes can miss that step. And then two, if the person's been retired long enough, it might have been before we implemented that. So because they haven't used insurance in 17 years, it's entirely possible. We just need to turn on the option for you, okay? It takes us like 2 minutes, no big deal. But just let us know if for some reason you can't see them. And keep in mind, under the newer version of MyTrust that we rolled out a few years ago, when you first bring up the insurance coverage, brand new people don't show there. You have to look for them under Add Change Coverage, okay? It's only going to show you people initially who have coverage. All right. Now, we'll talk about change enrollments. These are the ones that get done the most. This is when people are changing plans, they're changing options. Maybe you're adding a new coverage option of some sort. So, they already have medical, but now they're going to have dental for the first time, or they're going to have vision for the first time, or if you offer it, or maybe a second medical, things like that. Okay, so that's what changes are going to be. They're going from one plan to another, starting in a new period. All right. Now, correct enrollments are pretty similar, but let's say you go in and you make a change and you accidentally weren't thinking about their coverage dates. You were thinking about their when the deduction gets taken out. So now you put it in a month too early, right? Well, what a correct enrollment's going to do is it's going to allow you're keeping all the options the same, but all you're fixing is the dates, right? So a correct enrollment will allow you to do that. You won't have to go through quite as many selection steps. You can just fix the dates, okay? So that's what a correct enrollment's for. I mean, there are people who never do a correct enrollment. Even if they've accidentally done the wrong date, they just go in and use a change enrollment, and that's fine, okay? And then last but not least, cancel enrollment. So this is when people are canceling coverage. So maybe you're gonna, you do not have to cancel coverage before adding new coverage. So if you're changing from one plan to the other, don't do a cancel and then do a change. Just do a change. And during the change, you turn off the old plan, you enact the new plan, okay? But this will be just somebody saying, you know what, I'm gonna get my insurance somewhere else, or maybe you're canceling on them because of, whatever the situation is. The cancel enrollment is how you process that, okay? And when you're putting in a cancel enrollment, unlike the first three, where you're going to be adding new coverage effective on a certain date, right? Cancel is kind of counterintuitive. You have to put in the end date for when you're canceling it. So if their coverage is going to be canceled as of June 30th, you're putting in June 30th from the beginning of the wizard, okay? And we did that to try and really force through that people are cognizant of that before they get into the enrollment itself. All right. All right, so those are the 4 types. We also have a video for each one of these 4 types where we walk you through a demonstrated version of that. I didn't want to walk the whole Commonwealth through that today. So we're going to show you where those videos are. Each one of them is much shorter than this. It's like 5 minutes. But the best part about it is if you feel comfortable with all this stuff, anytime you need a refresher on doing a particular enrollment type, we have a very specific 5, 7, 8-minute video that covers all the nitty-gritty details about that kind of change individually. So you don't have to kind of like assume it all at one time, okay? And they're always available to you. So the next step here is we're going to talk about the training videos that are online, right? So as I mentioned before, we have an entire library that's up and available for you. Not only do we have these longer sessions where we talk about all the different subjects, but we also have individual ones for all 4 of the changes, which includes retroactive changes on the change video. We have videos for plan price changes, and we have one just exporting your reports. We have that available to you as well if you've never done that before. So again, at any point, if you can't get one of us, that information is always available for you. You can actually watch us do it. And those sessions are much shorter than these ones. We call them coffee break sessions because in theory, none of those videos should last longer than a cup of coffee in a payroll person's hand. So if you're a town clerk, think about how fast you go through your coffee. Those videos will be quicker. All right. And as you know, for me, that's a challenge. So, all right. And then this is a list of all the retiree insurance coffee break videos. And as you can see, we have downloading reports, the initial, change, canceling, viewing history, adding plan rates. We have them all individually here too, and each one of them is pretty short in comparison to doing, say, a full session. All right. And to note these versus the longer subjects, you'll see that each one of these has the darker blue background. So they're all in the retiree insurance section, and then they're all grouped together in this way. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit more specifically about setting up initial coverage, right? So MPRS enables or sets up a retiree for insurance coverage as soon as we have their retirement application logged, okay? And so we know the person's going to retire. As long as we know they qualify for retirement, we will set them up immediately upon receipt. So basically, when we get a retirement application, the folks in our benefits team go through a process and they check in to make sure all the steps are there. There's a checklist on the front. Do we have all the documents, all that kind of stuff? So if you have a brand new retiree and you know the paperwork's been sent, you can actually put them in months before their first deduction, right? And we try to set this process up in this way so that you don't have to keep checking. You know, if you have 17 retirees, you can go in one day in June, just add everyone's coverage, right? That's our goal. And then if you can't add somebody, and you know that they applied for retirement sooner, reach out to us because that could be a problem. Like it could be that they decided not to retire, or it could be that we're not sure they have enough service to retire, or we don't have all the paperwork we need to set them up for retirement. So it'd be important as an employer for you to know that. If we have set them up, it's because we know they qualify for a benefit. Even if that benefit's not turned on yet, we know they're going to qualify for a benefit. And that's a matter of doing the calcs and all the verifications, which is quite a process for our benefits team. So we try to tell you nice and early so that you can go in one group, hopefully do them all, or maybe you do it in 2 waves because, you know, not every teacher is going to tell you they're going to retire on the same day. But we're trying to make this process as easy for you as possible. Even if we pay them late, we're going to take retroactive deductions based on when you told us to. So the whole idea is that you can go in, you can set it, you can forget it, and then look at it in the fall and just make sure all your new retirees are showing up when they're supposed to. All right. The retiree, so Mildred just had a good point. So she wanted me to point out that the retirement process can take a while. So first, please don't ask us all retirement season long, hey, is Jane set up yet? Is, you know, Karen set up yet? The whole point of setting it up this way is so that you can put in your coverage and have it set and know that MyTrust is going to take those deductions and make them retroactive, okay? Second of all, we have a couple thousand people retiring on the same day. So something like 2% of all members, you know, all of our members at any given point retire on the same day. So the retirement benefits team starts collecting those applications months in advance. They get, I want to say like 99% of the people that apply on time, which is like within, I think it's 60 or 90 days of the retirement date, processed in the first benefits warrant. So they process a tremendous portion of those. And then some of them are just more complicated. People forget some of their paperwork, their history is a little convoluted. They forgot that they had 2 years of service to buy, you know, things like that can take a little longer, okay? And then folks can retire or apply to retirement or apply for retirement retroactive to when they left work, which is usually June 30th for schools. And so they can do that all the way into August. So somebody might, you know, they had no intention to retire. They've put in their 34 years. They were like, I'm going to go one more year, even though I don't have to. But then they have that first week on the beach. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, I can't go back, you know? And so, you know, they probably talk to their spouse and just say, look, I'm done, you know? And so those processes, you know, if they're gonna apply later, unfortunately, they might be retiree number 2,142 in line, right? And so those processes can take a little longer, right? And so we, you know, as long as everything's intact, we pay people within 90 days of when we got their application or the retirement date, whichever's, you know, later. But sometimes it can take a little while. And so sometimes you'll be getting makeup deductions based on that. There can also be a complication like around domestic relation orders. If somebody is divorced and they're required to pay out a former spouse part of their benefit, there may be complications that the legal team's figuring out with them. Like, you know, we know you have a domestic relations order, but it legally doesn't make sense or something like that. So sometimes that can cause some delays too. But please know when you've added the coverage in, MyTraS is going to sit there and it tallies the bill every month. And once they get paid out, it should, we're monitoring to make sure that those deductions come out to make you whole once they are in a pay status. All right. Now, when again, we're going to enable your new retirees when we receive their application, right? And again, we're going to make sure they have the minimum service needed to retire. Okay. So if we have question on that, we're going to reach out to the retiree immediately and be like, you have 5 years of service. Like, what? You don't have enough to retire or something like that. Right. Or for some reason, they only give us half the paperwork they're supposed to. That's kind of rare these days because the retirement application in its first page is literally a checklist. But sometimes things can be held up, or, they think they sent us something they didn't, or, whatever the situation is. Now, if you're going to add in your coverage, keep in mind, you want to set up the coverage based on when they're going to start getting deductions as a retiree. So for most folks, it's usually September 1st because they're covered as an active employee through the summer. Their active employment doesn't somehow nullify just because they're retiring. And so if they're typically going to be covered through August, you're probably looking for September 1st. In some cases, it might even be October 1st, and you might be taking extra deductions from their active pay to cover them through that period. But that's something to be mindful while you're setting them up. And it's super important that you not double deduct them. So you do not want to take deductions in a situation where you've taken it from their active pay and now you're hitting them again as a retiree for the same overlapping period. It seems kind of rare that would happen, but I know in one employer there was a little confusion there. And sometimes there needs to be a better communication chain between the town and the school. So please make sure that's happening, okay? You can add in all of your coverage while they're still active technically, right? So for instance, you go in on June 1st and you're like, all right, I already know I have these 15 retirees. You can put them all in for October 1st. Everything is going to be happy. It doesn't matter that it's so early, okay? That's why we designed the system to work this way. However, sometimes we get calls from people and they're really nervous. They're like, well, it says they're still an active employee. Well, yeah, you're doing it in June. They are still an active employee. That's normal, right? We know they're retiring, but in the system, it's either going to say they're active because their termination date hasn't happened yet, or their termination dates, has happened and we haven't paid them yet. So they're technically listed as an inactive member. Okay, perfectly normal. Now, sometimes again, it can take a couple months for somebody to get paid. So if you set them in for their retirement date based on, okay, this is when we're expecting them to get paid, this is when their insurance is going to start. Don't turn around and then bill them outside the system, right? Because now they're going to get double deducted. And you get, well, geez, they didn't get paid for the first 2 months. We had to bill them. No, you didn't. That's the whole point of putting in the stuff early so that you can let the system track through. It can get a little convoluted if you're in MyTraS changing the date all the time because you don't know when they're on first pay status. And our benefits team does not need the calls of people, is Sally Joe paid yet? That sort of thing. Please act in good faith. MyTraS will take the deductions for the period and we'll get you caught up. It's a very small percentage of retirees that fall into this boat. So the benefits you get from having the money come out automatically vastly outweigh when you occasionally get the first 1 or 2 deductions a little bit late. All right. If you have questions as to why they're not in pay status, if it's been a few months or something like that, certainly we can take a look and just make sure everything's on par. If a retiree rescinds their retirement, we have asked our benefits team to make sure that we become aware so we can tell you of that as soon as we know. Retirees can't really do that after the retirement date. So it tends to be a very few and far between kind of situation, but we will let you know actively that has happened if for some reason that has happened. Occasionally somebody goes in and they realize they didn't quite know the rules under Retirement Plus or something. So then they're, and in theory, your active school district usually knows because you're usually going back to work for you for 1 more year. So, it's something also if for some reason, if the school department finds out before the MPRS finds out, that, there should be some coordination there too. Okay. Now, once you put in changes for an initial coverage, there's a couple steps to this that is going to happen. So first, MyTraS is going to see if you're adding it in for somebody while they're still in either active or inactive status, because we haven't paid them yet. So their benefit amount is 0. Okay. So if you go in and make a change, the amount is going to say that it's more than half of their benefit. And it's going to give you that message. That is perfectly normal because half of anything, any dollar amount is more than half of 0, right? So for an initial change, it's going to bypass that error for you. Okay. It's going to say, hey, this is more than half. But again, if you know you're doing an initial enrollment, it's not a problem. If you try to do that to somebody who's been, paid their pension for 3 or 4 months, it's not going to let you. It's going to block you, and it's going to say, yeah, you can't do that. You're going to decimate the retiree's benefit. You're going to have to contact the MTRS for help, right? Now, in some cases, somebody might have a really low benefit and they have a really high insurance amount, and we're going to let that go through. Just reach out to us at Insurance Updates and we'll help you with facilitating that, okay? But when you're making the initial change, and we're going to show you a picture of what that looks like in just a minute, but keep in mind that the initial enrollment will have that, okay? Now, once you've made your changes, you're doing it in one wave because we're bypassing that error message, right? So if you have a couple of things you need to put in, you need to do them all in one step, okay? So I know I kind of explained things a little out of order there. I'm going to show you the message in just a moment. But if you're adding, say, first medical, second medical, and then dental, you have to do it in one step, like one wave through, or else MyTrust isn't going to allow you to make a change. Now, that doesn't mean you can't make mistakes, right? So if you put in first, second, and whatever medical, or let's say you only put in medical and then you realize afterwards, oh shoot, they wanted dental. It doesn't mean it can't be done. It's just for that secondary thing, you're going to have to email us. We can force it through on our side. So if you've added in medical in one wave, once they have coverage, because it's over 0, it's not going to let you do it. So you just email Insurance Updates to say, okay, I've added brand new coverage to somebody, but you know what? I accidentally forgot to add the dental. Can you add the dental for me? And this is their information, and either Millie or myself can put them in. So that's what we're talking about here at the top here. And then again, the second one is just to contact us to let us know if you've made some kind of mistake or you missed something, and we can add it in for you. So on this one, I know I kind of talked about this before, but I was kind of explaining why you get blocked. So, there's no perfect order to be able to do these two in. So in this case, I'm showing what the actual message is going to look like when you're adding changes to your initial enrollments. So this error message will pop up for you, and it'll say the rebill is greater than 50%, and this is perfectly normal, okay? So this is going to happen whenever you're putting in a change and the person's in inactive or active or inactive status still, right? Because you're entering the change in June for September. They're just not listed as a retiree yet, so their benefit's not in the system yet. Now, if you're putting them in June and our benefits team has already calculated their benefit, you won't get this message, right? So occasionally when you're putting in initial coverage, you won't get this message because maybe our benefits team's already calculated it and MyTrust already knows that the amount's going to be okay. So if you don't get the message in initial, that's not a concern. It's just more so that if you get it during an initial enrollment, it's perfectly normal to get it there, okay? And we're going to let you bypass it only in an initial enrollment. All right. And again, you get this exact message when it pops up, and it just says that your coverage you've entered is greater than 50%. Now, if you're getting this error message and it's an existing retiree, right? Somebody who's been having deductions for a couple of years, MyTrust isn't going to let you put in that change. It's going to require you to contact us and explain to us why you're making a change that's so large, right? So please keep that, bear that in mind when you're going through making your changes. Are there any questions on that for initial enrollments first before I go to the next step?
I do have a couple of questions I've been sitting on for a bit.
Okay.
Bobby, is it okay to ask?
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay, first one is Pioneer Valley Regional had our teacher retirees in the RMT GIC insurance program, and GIC handled all aspects of their insurance selections. As of July 1st, our school system will be in the municipal side of GIC. Will I need to add each retiree back in retiree insurance section of my TRS?
Yes. So the initial process is, picture this as being the equivalent of starting up for the first time. So congratulations on freedom. And now you're going to be able to you'll have full control of being able to do all their options and all that sort of stuff. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to get them all enabled. And we need to get all your new plans to the system. I'm not sure if Mildred knew about this transition yet, so it's possible she was aware and I'm not. So we got to get your plan information so that we can get all your plans set up for you. Then we need to make sure all your retirees are properly enabled. So we'll get that taken care of. And then you'll be able to add initial coverage to each one of them, because while they're in the GIC plan, they're not set up for management in the MyTrust system. So this is like setting up brand new retirees for all your retirees. That will only happen the once, okay? And then you'll only have to add new people if they've never had insurance before, or just make changes like everybody else. And the plan price changes going forward will be the normal automatic structure. And,
Great,
and just one last thing with that, I would email insurance updates at TRB as soon as possible, just to kind of get that conversation started with Millie, who's nodding her head in my office right now. Okay.
Great, thanks. Next question. Is it required that if someone retires as of June, that their benefits do not start as of September, October? Typically, if we knew they were retiring well ahead of time, we changed their deductions to only deduct as active through payroll until June, and then start new ones in NTRS in July.
Well, that's a good question. I think you're in a murky legal area with that. And so actually, this is a perfect question that's going to set up to my next slide. So I'm going to just ask that we park that, and then I will answer it at the end of this slide, if that's okay. Do we have any other questions? And then I'll hop back into this one.
We do not.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk about what to do at the end of the school year first. Then I promise we'll go back to that. And if I still have an answer, please let us know. But so we have a whole explanation basically here of what to do at the end of the year. So if you're in the GIC's RMT program, which means they're handling it directly, make sure you're following the GIC's very specific rules about how to take the deductions, okay? So you want to make sure you withheld the deductions for any partial month and then 2 full months following the person's retirement date. Okay, that's the GIC's rule. That's how they work with it. So you want to make sure you're following that protocol in accordance with the GIC. I presume if folks who are probably already left this training program, if they are in a GIC direct program, but that's how that works. Okay, so make sure that if you're in that program specifically, you're following their rules for stuff. Now, let's say you're not in the GIC plan where you're doing the automatic process, right? So, first, I'm going to say, and especially in some of your collective bargaining agreements, it's very specific about this. You're going to treat the person like it's a normal work year. What would you have done every other work year when they've left June 30th, right? They're covered for insurance through August because that's how school years work. And so I presume you'd go that direction. And then legally it can be a little interesting depending on, why you would treat them differently that year than every other year that they've been an employee at the end of a school year. You wouldn't treat them differently if they were terminating, like they'd have health insurance benefits through August. So I would say that keep in mind that when someone is going from active to retiree, they're terminating employment just like everybody else. So they'd be covered through August at least. And then switch over to, and if nothing else, the fact that it comes out of wages instead of coming out of on a post-tax basis, they might have a grievance with you as far as moving it over sooner. So we have to be careful of trying to point you in the right direction without giving you very specific legal advice on a matter that we're not in the middle of. So I'm going to try to just be careful to leave that at the door. But keep in mind, you could be costing them tax money in which they'd have a legal reason to come after you for it. They'd also have a pretty strong basis of the fact that you're treating them different than other employees. So I'd seriously sit down and think about those aspects before making that decision. If your employer has a different policy, again, I would review that policy if it's going to conflict with tax laws and other things. But make sure you're following your policy. I can only presume you got good legal advice when you went that route, and make sure that when you're putting in their coverage to MyTrust, though, that you're factoring those thoughts in when you're setting up their first date, right? So you don't want to, if you're like, oh yeah, we don't need insurance deductions until October, but if they retired July 1st, so I put in July 1st. I've actually had someone say that to me before. I was like, all right, well, you over deducted them for 2 to 3 months. So keep in mind, if for whatever reason you had them pre-bill you, you were like, all right, we're going to start your deductions in November. We're going to have you pay us, a check for the first 2 months, whatever. I guess there's no rules against that. That would be fine. But make sure MyTrust is going to match. Once you've put it in MyTrust, please don't just start adjusting it all over the place. It creates chaos. Things will go wrong. You'll end up refunding people you shouldn't be refunding, all kinds of other stuff. All right. The whole idea of this setup is to try to make it the least amount of pain, the least painful possible when you're doing it. And it's to give you a process that you can rely on and be able to get your work done with hopefully the least amount of frustration, and without somehow being impacted by how long it can take or when a retiree legally applies to retire. So please keep in mind that all those structures are in there. So hopefully that answers your question. But I also wanted to kind of just show the slides at the same time. All right. While setting all this stuff up, that leads us to retroactive coverage, right? I mean, sometimes, well, let's say, like I mentioned before, early in the program, you might be making a change for somebody. They turn 65. You're putting it at the end of the month. They still have the option to change, to medics. I can tell you that after 25 years of working with teachers, they are not always prompt with paperwork. And so retroactive changes are absolutely enterable in MyTrust. So when you're entering in your deductions, always enter them in with a proper effective date. You'll see a transaction called a rebill. So essentially, think of it as when we bill the person, or we're taking the initial charge, that's when we're billing them, right? And those actually show up as e-bills in the system. You can see them. And then the second is we're rebilling them in the sense that we're reconsidering their cost for that period, okay? That's where the term comes from. If you manually billed or refunded your retiree, you're going to have to adjust the dates of MyTrust. Please don't do that. I guess in some cases, if it's an emergency, like maybe they're getting super overcharged and like they can't pay their mortgage or something, I get it. But aside from that, don't try to use two different accounting standards going on. It'll just end up being sloppy and messy, and the system won't match, and it won't make sense on their their 1099Rs, that kind of stuff. Let MyTrust do the calculation. So if you're putting in a change now, and let's say, for instance, the person, someone turned 65 this month, okay, and they don't tell you, our benefits warrant for this month is already closed. So, okay, it's too late to put it in on time, right? Now they can't even put in May ones on time, right? No big deal. You put it in today. MyTRS will calculate a bill. You'll get a little green marker comes up and it says rebill created, right? Rebill generated, pardon me. And then please, for the love of God, go to their account history screen, which is the link below where you're making the changes, look them up, and just make sure that bill makes sense. So if their insurance has dropped $100 a month and you're now owe them two deductions of refund, right? Because you have the one for May that's already set in the system, and then maybe you have the one for April, right? Because it's an April 1st change. Okay, so you should expect them to have a refund for $200 in the system, waiting for them when we process the May benefit. You can go in and you can see it. Okay, and it's clear as day. It's going to be in red, the accounting standards, red for refund. It's going to be black for a bill if their prices have gone up, and it's immediately available for you, right? So we're talking milliseconds after you hit submit. So there should be no surprises. Please make sure whenever you're making individual changes to go in there. We're all human. You type in 2025 instead of 2026 and you refund somebody $2,700, Millie's going to call you. She's going to be upset that you didn't tell her. So, and if you make any large changes, please tell Mildred at the time, right? So you should always email your retiree while you know what you're doing so that it's clear to the retiree what happened and you have a receipt for yourself. And second, you should send one to insurance updates or copy insurance updates, and just so that Mildred knows why there's a large refund. Because every month we go through all the ones that are over $500, and if we don't get an answer that we think, if it doesn't look reasonable to us, so we have no idea what's going on, we're just going to go ahead and close it out. We'll tell you, but we're going to close it out because we're not going to let it go through if we don't know what's going on, right? Now, in some cases, it might be easy for us to figure out, but the more information you give to us, the better everything will go smoothly, all right? And please always check that screen, okay? And also keep in mind the monthly deductions for that period get calculated during the warrant process, right? So, which is, our retiree payroll process. So when we were processing our retiree payroll a few days ago, it was calculating all the ones for May, right? So that transaction doesn't get added till we're actually doing the payroll. The reason being is you don't want to put it in earlier and then it gets changed all the time. That way, it's always doing it on the information in the system as of the time the retiree warrant's processing. So when you're looking at the retro portion, that's just the retro portion. It's not going to include that month's basis. So if you have a $500 refund going out and they get charged $400 for insurance, they're not going to see a deduction for insurance. They're going to see a $100 refund. It's going to be the difference in those two numbers in that category. Okay. And those deductions are categorical. So if you have somebody go from a family plan in medical to an individual plan in medical and an individual plan in second medical, they may have a larger refund in medical and then a retroactive charge in second medical. The math's going to be okay, but it's, it can look a little fuzzy, right? Because the numbers are getting commingled in the medical field. All right. So just keep that in mind. And can't say enough. Email your retiree. You can get their email addresses out of if you pull a GASB report out of MyTRS, And so if you don't have your retirees' email addresses, we have a better stat for retiree email addresses than we do active members. So it'll allow you to inform them. You give it to them in writing. You have a copy for yourself that you told them. So communication's key. Trying to remember 90 days or 60 days after you make a change, why you made a change and why they're getting billed an extra $110. While you're doing it is when you're going to know everything that's going on. So please communicate it at that point. And again, I know I said a little of this before, but the current month's bill is not going to show up until we're actually processing the payroll. Rebills are reviewed daily. So I know it says daily, but honestly, we do the global ones daily. We do the 500 plus once or twice a month, just because volume. And if it generates $500 or more, please make sure you update Mildred at Insurance Updates, either Millie or I, depending on who's covering at the time, just so that we're aware, right? That way, when we get to the bill, if you're saying I'm refunding this person $1,300 because, oops, we didn't know their spouse had passed away, and now we're switching them to individual, and it's a couple months old, no problem. My trust will take care of that refund. No big deal at all. It's just good for us to know that $1,300 refund is legitimate. Okay. And it's not uncommon to see a big bill like that. So now, along with retroactive coverage, only delete plan coverage row if you need to, right? So if you're, let's say, for instance, times where you need to delete an entire row, that entire row never should have happened, right? So someone canceled their coverage as of December 31st. You already did as of July 1st, right? Let's say for going forward. And you had already done a plan price update. So the plan price update just automatically added a July 1st row for them. Okay, well, they're leaving on June 30th. You're going to delete that July 1 because it doesn't apply to them, right? Let's say you're switching plans. Oh, no, the price plan added July 1st as Tufts, but I need it to be, it needed to be Blue Cross or something, right? So you need to delete the Tufts row to replace it with the Blue Cross, okay? So that's pretty much the only times you're going to be deleting plans. Really, if you need that row to be gone forever. Deleting a plan is not about cleaning up the clutter in their account, okay? If you delete a plan, MyTrust is going to understand that any deductions under that plan row should be returned to the retiree. So if you go in there and you delete it and you weren't supposed to delete it, it is going to cause a huge incorrect refund. A school district once went in there, decided, this looks easy enough. I'm not going to read any of the directions. And so they created like $190,000 worth of refunds. That's why we blocked you out for 3 days, because it took Millie and I hours and hours and hours to restore all those deductions to all those retirees. So please be mindful of the directions and remember that you're only deleting stuff. MyTrust has great capability. So even if you build a retiree for the last 4 months and you shouldn't have, you have the capability of fixing it. So with that comes a lot of responsibility and make sure you're entering in everything, okay? And that you're entering it in correctly. So that's a huge responsibility for school district. So please make sure you're aware of how that works, just to avoid those really bad conversations and kind of causing havoc for your retirees' pay. All right. So are there any questions on retroactive coverage for now?
Yes.
Okay.
First question, is it possible for retroactive entries that the retiree is left with a very small check due to the retro deductions accumulating? What happens in that case?
So we actually look for this. We've seen them get reduced to a penny. That's the lowest it'll go because they have to exist on the payroll. We had one of these a few days ago. Active coverage, person started, I want to say in January. We'll say it's January just for example. And the school had not put in the coverage ahead of time. And so they're taking retroactive changes, and not only will it wipe out this whole check that's happening at the end of this month, it's going to take, like, I think, if I remember correctly, $700 or $800 out of their next month's check. Okay. So in that case, where it's such a large amount, you should have checked with your retiree before you decimate their pay like that, right? Even though they know they're required to pay the insurance, you're also required to do it in a responsible manner. So you should always be in coordination with your retiree. And as long as the retiree, in my experience, we do this every single month where we watch for these. And in my experience, it's pretty rare that a retiree is like, no, I get it. I didn't realize the deductions weren't coming out. I get that. Yeah, just have it come out. We'll take some money out of savings, but you could have somebody who's just in a situation where they don't have that option, right? They may need to look to Maybe we'll start the deduction in real time and then set up an arrangement to do a makeup deduction or something, because they can't afford to do it all in one shot. So this goes back to that $500 thing. If it's too much of a hardship or it looks like it's going to wipe out the benefit, we don't know that the retiree is on board, we're gonna zero it out, and you're not going to get that retroactive payment. So Millie and I work on this every single month with our benefits team to make sure there are no surprises to retirees. And even this, like I said, in the last 10 days, Millie was on the phone with somebody and she was like, yeah, no, take the whole thing. Like, thanks for letting me know. I appreciate that. And now I know it's not an error. And she said, she had wished she had caught it too. So not a big deal. Just make sure, again, keep your retirees in the loop. They understand the responsibilities. Then it might always be happy, right? But it's important that we have good communication with all that. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have two more questions. It looks like Millie's replying to one, but the second one, I believe they're from the same person. They may be the same issue, so I'll just go ahead and read it. So the MTRS receives an application and it goes through an extensive review when somebody's retiring. Once it's approved, the communication is mailed to the retiree. So the question is, I work for your municipality and need proof that the employee's retirement has been approved and they will be receiving a pension. Is there anything online I can get as proof that the employee's retirement has been approved by the MTRS?
Well, if they qualify for a legal benefit, the fact that you can add coverage to them is proof that they're going to get a benefit. Exactly what that benefit is might not have been calculated, but the fact that you can add insurance to them is proof that they're going to get a retirement benefit. So even though the MTRS has to calculate their benefit, if they have a minimum amount of service, then you can add insurance to them. If you can't add insurance to them, or if we don't know that they're going to qualify for a benefit, they're not enabled until we know for sure that they qualify for a benefit. So you can't add insurance to somebody who doesn't have that. Hopefully that helps to answer the question. Okay. And if you need us to have a little more information on that or something, please email us at the insurance updates and we'll, we can have an individual conversation as well.
Okay. No further questions in the chat.
Awesome. Okay. So, the next subject, unfortunately, is something we have to deal with all the time. It's never a happy occasion. So, unfortunately, all of us someday are going to pass on. So, procedurally, if you find out a retiree passes away, we have a procedure that we like you to follow. In the event that a retiree or their spouse dies, please send their coverage accordingly as of the last day of the month in which the party died, right? So if someone passes away on May 2nd, all their coverage from the retiree's benefit ends May 31st, okay? Because they died on May 2nd. It's a full month, even if they died only one day into the month, okay? Now, they may have a spouse that's going to qualify as a survivor and have deductions coming out. Well, that pay will come out of a different benefit. It'll come out of the survivor's benefit. So again, coverage for through the month in which the person was living will be through the retiree, and then any subsequent periods will come through the survivor's benefit. Okay. Deductions can be taken from a survivor's benefit as soon as they're set up. That one can be a little squirrely as far as the setup, because we need the surviving family member who's going through, terrible grief to complete some paperwork so that we can turn on their benefit. Sometimes they have options, that sort of thing. And so we try to get that benefit enabled as soon as we can, but we actually, in that case, we need the survivor to get us back the paperwork, because we have to prove there's a survivor and that they're still with us before we'd have an account. So unlike when somebody is naturally retiring from the MTRS, we can't really set the benefit up early. We can enable the retiree the survivor, as soon as we have the paperwork back from the survivor. So even though the benefit isn't even entered in the system yet, they're to add their effective the ability to have deductions taken from them as soon as we're like, okay, we've got everything we need. Coverage can be added to their profile. The exception to that would be if their survivor is also an MTRS member. So if the survivor is either got their own benefit, even if it's from a different employer, then they'll be enabled sooner because then they already have an account, they already have a member number, and they survivor benefit can be tagged onto their personal pension, right? In a lot of those cases, they might go back to their primary employer for insurance, but maybe you have a better plan than they do, that kind of thing. So in cases where the person's already in our system receiving a benefit, their coverage will be immediately addable once we're sure that they're collecting the survivor benefit. If you could please notify insurance updates with the date of death when possible. If you happen to have a copy of the death certificate, like particularly if you're the employer and you're in the same town that the person passed away, you have great records to their death certificate. So if you could at all pass that on to us, that would be fantastic. It allows us to process them even faster and get them up and available for you to be able to add the benefits. If the person is passing away, say it's a spouse, and we need to just drop down the coverage, it would be important for us to know too, because if the person is an option C beneficiary, sometimes they don't realize that they qualify for a scale up. So, you have Mary as an option C retiree, so that she's reserved the right to give her husband or her wife a benefit upon her passing, right? And so if their spouse passes away, they predecease the retiree gets recalculated as if they're no longer an option C retiree. So it's important for us to know that, because sometimes the retirees don't know that we're going to recalculate them and they get more money every month. And so probably not the first thing in their mind when they've lost their partner, right? So if we could get that information so that we can take care of the retiree, that would be great. Because obviously, they're entitled to that, and we want to make sure that we're recalculating them to get the full benefit they've earned. Okay. And again, that if you have access to the death certificates, it's so helpful because sometimes you can get them faster than the family can. So, and I did mention that they can have for the last bullet here is just that if a person's already receiving an interest benefit because they've also earned a benefit. Now, sometimes they're in the same employer, so really you're not, they're not a survivor anymore. They're your employee who's accessing their retirement insurance, their insurance benefit. I once had a school district not really think about that fact. So if you're not sure if they're your retiree, because I forget who it was, but one of the schools, and they were like, all right, well, I was like, why are you charging them as a survivor? They had like 30 years with you, and they just because they've been drawing from one plan, because employers require both a husband and a wife, or I should say both parties in a married situation, to have like family coverage, right? So it all came from one of the retirees. They went with the one that was making more under retirement. So when one of them passed away, the other one was eligible just as an employee. They didn't have to pay survivor rates, and so we caught it pretty quick. So it wasn't that big a deal, but still, be mindful of that. You can look right on your GASB to see if they're your retiree, because if they're a retiree and a member survivor, they'll show up with two lines. They'll have one under their survivor and then one under their primary benefit. Okay. I know, actually, just before I leave that, are there any questions on this process? Oh, and please know, if we find out before you do that your retiree has passed, we try to send out notice to you just to give you a heads up, like, hey, we found out so-and-so has passed away. So you'll get an email either directly from the retiree benefits team, or if they're not sure who to send it to, they'll ask Millie to send it out because they don't know who to send to for that town or something. And then we'll try to update our records so they can send it to you directly so that you get it as quickly as possible. Okay. Any questions on when someone passes?
Yes, one question directly related to that. Do families or beneficiaries of deceased retirees need to contact the MTRS, or will the MTRS reach out to them?
We will reach out to them, but I'd encourage them to contact us directly, because if we don't have good contact information, then like that might be the best way for us to find out. If you have their contact information when you're telling us that they passed away, by the way, feel free to include it. Just because we might have an out-of-date phone number, an out-of-date address for them, or it might be the first time we're finding out that the primary beneficiary is deceased, and so we might be reaching out to a child that we didn't have the contact information for. So more information is always beneficial, and having the family reach out to us is helpful too, because it can allow our folks to the opportunity to serve them quicker and more efficiently, and hopefully help them through a kind of terrible time in their life.
Great. There's one other question. It looks like Millie is actively responding to it, so everyone will be able to see the question and answer in the chat.
Okay, awesome. All right. Let me just go here. So the next section to cover is the retiree GASB report. So we're going to talk about reports in general first, and then we'll talk about the GASB. But so each month, employers should download a monthly deduction report. Check it against your check total. We have two different versions. We have the standard report, which shows like each retiree and then all the deductions under that retiree. We also have one we do by it groups them by the actual by provider. So all your Blue Cross deductions are lumped together for that total, so you can kind of quickly compare them to the insurance. Some people like to download both, which is fine. You can also download, it's still labeled the GASB 45, even though we've got, I know the GASB 45 itself is retired and you have a new version that you do your OPEB studies under. We kept the name consistent just because there were a lot of folks that were just used to calling it that, and I don't want to update it every time they change the number. But it's still in the format that's going to allow you not only for what was the old reporting format, but we did update it so that it should help you with your OPEB study. Now, that information is too sensitive to email. So one, we don't email to you. You can download it from the system. Two, you should not be emailing it to other people. So if your actuary needs a copy of it, there should be some sort of secure transmission process set up between you and your auditor and how to transfer that information, okay? Sometimes I know it may be the school department that's covering the OPEB study as part of their financial reporting, what have you. Anybody with access to MyTRS, so the school department in theory, in a situation like that, you would have they would have access to download themselves. And then I would recommend always doing the CSV option. So that will pop it out to Excel, but you can kind of manipulate it a little better. There is a PDF form, but the writing, because it's such a wide report, will look like ants, crossing across a page. So again, I would go with that CSV option so you can pull the information out and you'll have it in Excel and you can format it however you need, sort it, all that fun stuff. And then just a note, we do not provide OPEB studies for employers. That's an employer responsibility. It's not something we do. And we also don't provide OPEB information on active employees. They're your employees. So hopefully you know enough about them to process any of their benefits that you need. Their information or credible service with other employers is not information that's available to their current employer, right? So occasionally I'll get somebody like, well, I need to know all their prior history and other employers. And the answer, quite frankly, just is you don't have a right to that information. So the MTRS does not provide that, okay? Once they're retired and then they're assigned to you, of course, that's different. And you can download the GASB anytime you need it. Just keep in mind, unfortunately, sort of a deficiency of the retirement system, or excuse me, of MyTRS. When you go in to pull a GASB report, we're in the month of April, right? So we've run our April benefits warrant, our retiree payroll. So month of April is fine. If you were to sign in on May 1st, it's going to default to May because that's the month you're in. So you just need to backdate it at least a month in those cases, right? If you need it for June 30th, 2026, just change the month and day, a day and month to June 2020, or I'm sorry, June 2025, because 2026 hasn't happened yet. But change it to June 2025, and then you'll be able to pull the information. The demographic information on that, though, will not go back to June. It will go as of now. So things like the person's mailing address, their email address, all that will be available as to exactly what was in the system when the report was run. So if you're looking at a June 2025 report, but your retiree changed their email address in the system yesterday, you're going to get their new email address on that report as the contact info. Okay, so that will populate dynamically. And sort of with that, we've pretty much reached the end of our program here. So, you're a big part of what we do. We consider this a partnership. We're trying to do our best to help you administer, the health insurance portion of people's benefits that they've earned, helping everybody in the public. So, please make sure you understand the Retiree Insurance Administration. I know we did today's video, so thank you for attending. Please know we do have the guides that are available. The written guide has section 2, covers all this information in written form. So you have it all, nicely bulleted out. Spent a lot of time on that. I think it's 3 pages. Make sure, whenever possible, you're entering your retiree insurance changes in a timely manner before the monthly deadline. Again, we give you that deadline on or by the 1st of each month. communicate changes to your retirees. So if you've made a change, especially if there's a retroactive portion, please just email them that math then. It's much easier. Sometimes we'll have a school district, they make a change, and then they come to us and say, hey, why does it say this on the person's check? And, then we're doing like forensic accounting to figure out why it's off. And then we find out they had made a change 3 weeks ago. Well, if you're making that change at the time, communicate that to your retiree so that they're not surprised. And you'll also have the notes for yourself. That way, if the retiree calls you, even though you communicated to them, you know what you did, right? I mean, we're all busy. Nobody remembers what they did 3 weeks ago. At least I don't. I don't know about you. I don't remember what I ate, for lunch Monday. So, it's important to try and communicate that all out while it's fresh in your mind and the information's available. Okay. If you'd like a physical instruction manual, we will happily mail you one. Just email us at Insurance Updates, and we will send you out books as needed. You can have more than one if you want, especially if you have a big office, 3 people working on stuff. We'll send you 3. No big deal. We have boxes of them. Okay. And then if you have questions on insurance issues, please send them to insuranceupdates@trb.state.ma.us. And that is because even though Mildred and I work on the stuff, one, if we're in the insurance updates box, we're not in our email box. So you're going to get the answer faster in the insurance updates box. 2, if Mildred, who has worked hard all year long, has decided to disappear to Cabo or somewhere, hopefully that's nice with drinks with little umbrellas in them or something. That's what I'm hoping for her. Anyway, if she goes away, then I might be covering, right? So if you email it to Mildred, I don't see her email. So please send it to the insurance box so that we can try to give you an expedited answer. Also, it'll help us know that if Mildred's getting 150 questions on the same day, we're going to jump in and help. Okay. And then last but not least, don't copy us also. It's doubling up the work. And what it can absolutely do is with all, good faith thought process, we may think something got answered and then we delete it from our inbox, not realizing that it wasn't copied to insurance updates or vice versa. It gets a little confusing when you're dealing with a lot of emails. So we don't want to miss your email because we deleted it thinking we answered it in a different box, right? So please just send them to the insurance updates box. Millie's in there every single day. Some of us are in there helping her when she needs it. And it also helps us kind of see like, okay, we need to jump in and help because people just have a lot of questions on this random Tuesday. Okay. So that would be greatly appreciated. And then last but not least, we do have all our contact information and all the information is available on our website. Do not get to the point where you look like the young lady in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. We've all been there, if you've gotten to her point where you're that frustrated, you probably should have reached out first. So, I can't say enough. I appreciate that you're here and you're going through this program. Hopefully we can help you be as successful as possible going through this process. Most of it, again, is going to have that same philosophy. Whenever there's a change, you're adding a row. Easy peasy, it starts the new cost period, right? And if you're always putting in your dates based on coverage, you should be in a good situation to succeed. And then weird things are going to happen. So email us when weird happens, and hopefully we can help you with it. All right. With that, again, on behalf of the board and our executive director, thank you for joining us. And we are here if you still have any questions. And if you have questions after the program, don't forget the email address is right here, insuranceupdates@trb.state.ma.us. So at the risk of being redundant, do we have any other questions for anybody that's with us now?
We do not have any questions in the chat.
Okay, we're going to do this auction style, going once. We'll give it just a minute, just in case somebody's typing. But aside from that, thank you all for joining us. And then, I presume if we're not going to get any more questions, we can wish you all a great Thursday.